Hi once again everyone, Dr. Marcus T. Anthony here, and in this video series of Mind Futures 2, I'm going to be outlining ideas related to the future of mind, artificial intelligence, and the digital society. Today's topic is, what is consciousness? And what are the main 6 representations or models of consciousness that we normally see in the history of science, philosophy, mysticism, religion, spirituality, and so on. There's a lot of mystics out there, philosophers, scientists over the centuries who've put forward frameworks to try to explain what consciousness is, and most of them fit into these 6 categories. Of course, there's some important distinctions that I can't go into here because we only have 10 minutes or so. If you think I've left something out or misrepresented something, feel free to put the comment in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That would help me a lot. And in the end, I'm going to tell you which of these 6 models I think is the best fit, at least for me. Okay, first we have to acknowledge a very peculiar problem, because even though in mainstream science only one of these models is typically seen or assumed to be correct, there's quite a big debate in philosophy about which of them is best, or if any of them are even particularly suitable to try to understand the nature of consciousness, which is one of the real unresolved issues in philosophy and in science itself when you delve deeply in. First, I'm going to talk about materialism, and this is sometimes known as scientific materialism, and it's the dominant theory in mainstream science today. There's a number of related materialist models, and these include logical behaviorism, type identity theory, token identity theory, functionalism, strong AI, eliminative materialism, and so on. Now, rather than go into detail about each of these, let me emphasize what such materialist positions often have in common. They tend to see the brain as a kind of computer. The brain sits in your head a bit like a piece of meat in a vat. Neurons fire and voila, your mind is squeezed out. Magic! Thus, materialist models all agree that consciousness emerges from the microscale functions of the brain. After all, if we remove a person's brain, it's pretty hard to find evidence of consciousness in them, with the possible exception of the Kardashians. But they look good, and on Meme World, that's important. And no, I don't use a filter on my camera. I'm too old for that shit. But I'm digressing. So getting back to materialism, almost all of today's mainstream neuroscience is founded upon materialism. Of course, nobody actually says that, as it would lead to an embarrassing series of questions. Just like nobody asks why newsreaders hold piles of paper in their hands which they never read. It's a mystery. In fact, as far as I'm aware, there is little or no questioning of the material nature of consciousness in most courses on neuroscience and in medicine today. Now, the strange bit that I was alluding to above, there's a puzzling explanatory gap which permeates modern neuroscience. How does this firing of lumpy bits of neurons produce the qualitative experience of consciousness? Nobody knows. Instead, we are to simply assume that in time, this explanatory gap will be filled. The brain is a computer or some kind of machine, or so we crudely assume, and we'll work it all out in the end. And most educated professionals seem to be okay with that. American philosopher John Searle, for example, has put forward the idea of biological naturalism. Searle sees consciousness as emerging from complex biological machinations. Yet, even he admits that nobody actually knows how that emergence happens. Nonetheless, he insists that such an explanation must exist, and that we must not desist in our pursuit of it. Some critics call this attitude promissory materialism. The mechanistic explanation is coming. Soon. Any day now. In fact, we are so sure about that, we don't even need to think about it. But we can't let the materialists off so easily, can we? In the 1990s, Australian philosopher David Chalmers famously identified the now well-known distinction between the easy problem of consciousness, research, that is, identifying its neural correlates, and the hard problem, explaining the qualitative feeling of consciousness. It's easy to hook people up to fMRI or EEG brain scanners and see what parts of their brain light up when they perform mental activities. And it has to be admitted that science has come a long way with the easy bit. And yet, in the 2020s, we're still struggling with the hard part. Promissory materialism conveniently hides the truth that the genuine nature of consciousness remains unresolved, despite more than 2,000 years of very smart people trying really, really hard to explain it. Of course, plenty of stupid people have tried as well, it has to be said, mostly without trying very hard at all. Many of them seem to like drinking beer at my local bar, I've noticed. Now, the stubborn resistance of materialists is understandable in one respect. Materialism has long enjoyed great success in many of the hard sciences and disciplines like engineering, computer science, chemistry, biology, and so on. Okay, so it's not been quite as successful in physics, but who cares about those freaky people anyway? After all, the rapid advances in technologies in neurosciences are indeed likely to provide much more understanding of consciousness in the future, albeit most likely advancing the easy problem. And yet, materialism has failed to account for the nature of consciousness itself. Furthermore, it is completely inadequate in explaining the cognitive functions associated with what I call integrated intelligence, as I shall discuss in an upcoming video. This is like creating a sexy design for a beautiful jet plane, but then admitting that it can't actually fly. So, what are some other theories of mind that might fit the bill? There are at least 5 which have historically competed with materialism for explanatory ascendance. The first is dualism, which is mostly commonly associated with 16th century French philosopher Descartes. And this way of thinking has been popular within spiritual and religious philosophies. Dualism typically finds that consciousness and matter are 2 distinct substances. The main problem with dualism is that it does not tell us much about how mind and matter can interact, and why is the universe made of 2 different kinds of stuff. Most current scientific and philosophical schools thus reject its validity. Then we have panpsychism, which insists that consciousness and matter are intertwined. Now, this way of thinking about the mind finds that all matter, even rocks and subatomic particles, contain at least some expression of consciousness. Perhaps this explains the pet rock craze of the 1980s. However, panpsychism is not a commonly held view today in mainstream science, at least. Still, some thinkers like Hong Kong AI scientist Ben Goertzel are open about their support of it. The philosopher Thomas Nagel, in his book Mind and Cosmos, is an eminent proponent of this idea that there is psyche or mind throughout nature. Such panpsychists propose that the mind is part of nature. This perspective had more philosophical support in the past than it does today, as does the related idea of animism. Panpsychism also has some overlap with neutral monism, where matter and consciousness are seen as expressions of a more fundamental reality. Now, critics of these philosophies commonly object to the claim that non-biological objects like mountains possess mind in any form. Another criticism is their alleged inability to resolve the problem of how smaller units of consciousness can combine to produce more complex levels of mind, such as that found in human beings. Okay, what about idealism? Idealism is a relatively common explanation for the experience of consciousness, especially in many religious and spiritual traditions. This perspective insists that the cosmos itself is fundamentally conscious. It typically includes the belief that reality does not exist independently of our perceptions. Many versions of the popular New Age idea of law of attraction fit into this category. Believe it hard enough, and boom shala, there it is. However, idealism is rejected by many scientists because they argue it fails to address why there is any objective experience of the world that is consistent across a conscious population of people or animals. Why does Justin Bieber still exist when so many people wish he would just go away? Finally, panentheism. Panentheism is the belief that God is greater than the universe, but includes and infuses it. This model suggests that there is a greater intelligence or intelligences beyond ours as individual human beings. But how could we prove or disprove such a claim? Having said this, my own views, based mostly on my personal experiences, are more closely related with this model, as you'll find out in later videos. So that's all for today. I'm not going to give you a definitive answer to which is the best way to think about consciousness. I know that you're very capable of reflecting upon this yourself. And I'm not a quiz champion, nor am I my wife, so I don't have all the answers. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time again here on Mind Futures 2. Bye for now.